Almost a million people from all over the world are visiting Yad Vashem every year. It is the second most visited Israeli tourist site after the Western Wall. And this is a lot, but how can they reach those who cannot come to Jerusalem to see it? There's a lack of knowledge about Holocaust, especially in the young generation. And many projects are trying to reach this generation through social media. And now Yad Vashem will present us their strategy, how to reach people from all over the world through digital media. Moderated by Iris Rosenberg, Director of the Yad Vashem Communications Division.
Thank you, Jenny. Welcome everybody to our panel. And first of all, I would like to thank Jenny and Susanna and congratulate them for this very successful so far and interesting media summit. And I would like first of all to introduce the following members of our panel today. With us is Professor Samuel Kassow. Professor Kassow is Professor of History at Trinity College in Connecticut, USA. He has written extensively on subjects related to the Holocaust, as well as Russian and Jewish history. In 2007, he wrote a book entitled Who Will Write Our History? About the Ringenblum archives in the Warsaw Ghetto during the Holocaust, which has turned into a film by the same title in 2018. Thank you, Dr. Kaminka. Thank you, Professor Kassow, for joining us. And now I will introduce Dr. Eyal Kaminka. He is the director of the International School for Holocaust Studies at Yad Vashem. He has extensive multidisciplinary experience in management, education, and organizational consulting. Under his leadership, the International School for Holocaust Studies holds around 70 educational seminars for educators from both Israel and around the world, providing tools for effective Holocaust education to thousands of participants every year. Dana Porath is the director of the digital department in the communications division at Yad Vashem. For more than 20 years, Dana has expertly been creating, designing, and building online content with express purpose of maximizing user experience for both Yad Vashem's comprehensive website in 8 languages and its very active presence in the social media, which of course we will explore later. The bios are included in the program. Today, our panel will first will try to do 2 things. First of all, we will try to address the different perspectives to gauge current levels of interest in the area of the Holocaust. There's a lot being told about people are not interested, or what is the awareness and education and knowledge about the Holocaust. But we would like, first of all, to kind of set the tone from people who are a lot of experience in working with the crowd, many different crowds, about what is the status of Holocaust awareness and interest in the Holocaust. We will first speak also about the general public. This is the broadest grouping, as it includes people from all walks of life and wide variety of educational, socioeconomic, and geographical backgrounds. We will want to hear also about the educators. This includes teachers from both the formal and informal spheres, community leaders, also law enforcement officers, opinion shapers, and journalists, and the academics. This group is comprised of historians and experts, both established as well as newer doctoral students. In the first round, we will get the current status of interest in the Holocaust, as I said, before diving deeper into the issue of how to engage the public via social media and digital media, not just the social one. Professor Kassow, I would like to start with you. Can you please briefly share with us what you see as the current status of interest and engagement in the Holocaust amongst academics, both your students and your peers? Please, Professor Kassow.
Well, among academics, of course, not only is there a great deal of rising interest in the Holocaust, but of course there's an exciting evolution scholarly approaches. The research that's coming out on the Holocaust now is paying much more attention to the role of prejudice, to the role of ideology. It's paying much more attention to the attitudes of bystanders towards the mass murder. We see what happened now as something that was much more inclusive, that was much more complicated, and the research on the Holocaust now is also focusing much more on microhistory. That is, what's happening on the local level, what happened in a particular town, what happened in a particular village. It's also showing the complexity of attitudes. A rescuer could also be a perpetrator. A bystander could stop being a bystander. We see now that much of the killing was not the direct result of orders from Berlin, but was developed spontaneously on the local level. In terms of non-academic interest in the Holocaust, the attitudes of my students, the attitudes of the general public, we have to take account the specific milieu, the specific context. In countries like Poland, Hungary, Lithuania, interest in the Holocaust intersects with a very disturbing challenge to emerging national narratives, which are often based on misrepresentations and distortions. In the United States, interest in the Holocaust intersects with, of course, a natural concern for the results and the implications of racism, of prejudice, of othering, of reducing individuals to threatening categories. In the case of the European Union, I think interest in the Holocaust to some degree intersects with this concern for of inclusivity, not turning your back on somebody else simply because he's not part of your ethnic group. So these are emerging issues which I think will ensure that interest in the Holocaust will continue. It will continue in a different context. We now have the internet. We have the fall of the Soviet bloc. We've had the record of ethnic violence in Bosnia and in Rwanda and in Cambodia since the Holocaust ended. But it's an event which will never cease attracting a great deal of concern and a great deal of serious study.
Thank you. So actually, what you're saying, that there is a rise among the academics and academic and scholarly world, and it's also combined with many different local perspectives and moral values and other issues. Very interesting. Thank you. Dr. Kaminka, can you please briefly share with us what you see as the status of interest and engagement in the Holocaust among educators and teachers specifically?
Thank you, Iris, for the introduction, and thank you for the organizers for being here. So actually, I want to start with some good news and some optimism, but then there are some challenging news at the end of what I want to say. So let's start with the good news. I share with Professor Kassow that the growing interest, and we see it in the last 10, 20 even years, but also in the last very few years, 2017, 18, 19, 20, we see a growing interest in the subject matter of the Holocaust. And I want to divide my to base this statement on two channels. One channel is studies and research that is done. So I can quote from research that was done, for example, by the Claims Conference in the United States, in Canada, in Austria, in France, in other places as well, starting from 2018, 19, 20. Most of the participants in surveys stated that students should learn about the Holocaust. It's worth learning, and they do study. About 93% actually from participants in the United States stated they should learn. And similar numbers in Canada, 82%, and 79% in France. When you go to Europe, a study that was done by UCL, University College of London, in 2016 showed that 85% of students have learned about the Holocaust, and actually 70% of the students want to learn even more than what they did. So they showed a great interest in the subject matter. A survey that was done in 2018 by the CNN in Europe showed that 2/3 of Europeans think it's very important to commemorate the Holocaust in order to prevent such an atrocity of happening again. And about half of the Europeans viewed the studying about the Holocaust as a tool in order to struggle, in order to fight anti-Semitism. So this is the channel of the research. In terms of field experience, as you mentioned, Yad Vashem is working with many countries. Personally, as the director of the International School for Holocaust Studies, I work with around 70 or 80, even 80 countries around the world. We listen very carefully to what the field is telling us. In 2019, pre-COVID-19, we held more than 80 international seminars here of teachers that came and wanted to study about the Holocaust, and each teacher went back to his home country and worked with 100 students, 200 students a year. And when you see it, these numbers along the years, we're talking about millions of students that were exposed to the Holocaust. So this seems to be a bright picture. However, and these are the challenging moments in my statement. I'm not going to elaborate about that now, but maybe later. We have many challenges in terms of what's called Holocaust education. One of them is the gap between awareness and knowledge, and we see it among students. And the other is the workload of teachers. Of course, students as well, but the attention span of teachers and the systems to this subject matter. But if I want to conclude, yes, a great interest, a growing interest. People see the importance and they see the relevance. However, it is very challenging, and we will talk about the challenges later.
We'll get to the challenges later. Thank you, Eyal. Very interesting and mind-opening for the rising interest. And of course, we will get to the challenges. Ms. Porath, can you please share with us what you see as the current status of interest in online content related to the Holocaust?
So I would say that basically since we first launched our website in 1999, there has been a steady growth. I would say a pretty constant and steady growth of interest in website content. And then as social media began to develop and platforms were launched, and Yad Vashem we became very active in every platform, or most platforms in many languages. What we've seen along the way, and there are peaks, of course, different times, but for the most part, it's been very constant and steady growth until recently. In March, when the pandemic really reached all corners of the world, and of course, everybody has their trepidations, personal, still have trepidations. But of course, professional, our concern was really, what are we going to share now? What will people be interested in? People are in lockdown all over the world. What are they going to be interested? Maybe we should share more positive content of happier endings, survivor, rescue, righteous among the nations. And we actually did begin that way. And we saw very quickly that people were interested in the content. They were interested in the authentic content. They weren't interested in a happy ending or story. And what we've seen, if you imagine a graph, kind of this steady sort of growth over all these years, in the last 5 or 6 months, we've seen a dramatic rise in engagement compared to, let's say, the same period a year ago. Now, we've also been posting much more and tweeting much more, and we've always been very active. But I have to say, it's not a quid pro quo situation. It's not like the more you post, the more engagement there is. Sometimes it works the opposite way if your content isn't interesting or relevant to people. So we saw that in Facebook, we had, over the same period of time as last year, over 50% growth of engagement. In Twitter, 25%, Instagram, 75%. YouTube increase. YouTube, almost 90% of increase of people watching longer. And you may say, okay, well, that makes sense. People are home, they have more time. On the other hand, the content is not easy. And apparently that is what people are connecting to is the testimony of the survivor, the authentic content. Our experience, my experience over these many years is that is what, in the end, that is what people want. Maybe now even more so. And that's really our job. Our job is to figure out ways to share the content from the website. We have literally millions of digital assets on the website in various databases and online collections. And we try to curate that content to share it with the public and curate it to fit also different platforms.
We will get to the how later. Now right. We would just want to make the what is the status of the interest, and what you gave us numbers that were really right. proving how the even in the Corona time, the COVID-19, you're Absolutely. Saying that actually it's not an easy content, not fun content, and still people are interested in this content, even more so.
I think it's important to note that we're very careful also. We don't share very graphic content. Mm-hmm. Meaning graphic violence or nudity or whatever. Our feeling is like this: that kind of content is available on the website in all the various collections and databases, but it has a context. When we share something, if you share a tweet or a post, it's out of context. And so therefore the bottom line is respect. Means that the content that we share, we have sort of a principle that guides us in that we have to be respectful of the content and the audience and the institution that we represent. And I think based on the metrics that we've seen, based on the engagement that continues to grow, particularly as of late, that relationship with the public, that what we share resonates.
Okay, thank you, Dana. Thank you for that. Thank you, everyone. We heard actually that what is the status of Holocaust awareness. And now we will talk a bit about how we can engage these groups that we mentioned and what we need to do differently. Eyal, let's start with you. Can you please give us a few thoughts and examples even?
Sure, I will give some thoughts, but let me again state what we are trying with our engagement tools and engagement approaches is to, again, bridge the gap between awareness and knowledge. Mm-hmm. We have to realize that when you talk about media and television and all the social media, etc., usually they raise awareness, but awareness is not enough. You have to go through an educational process in order to dive deeper and to get meaning from the subject matter. Otherwise, it's just in the air, and there is a high chance.
Fade away the same way.
There is a high chance of using and abusing the term Holocaust or some of the concepts. And I can give you a lot of examples of this gap if we have some time later on. But let's concentrate on tools that we have. So how do you create relevance and how do you engage students? So here in Yad Vashem, we have many tracks to do so. We have a lot of face-to-face tracks, but I want to concentrate more on the online tools that we have. We have Holocaust Education Video Toolbox. So we took key concepts of the Holocaust, and instead of making, 2 hours, 3 hours, 2 days of a seminar on these key questions about the Holocaust. For example, what is the Holocaust, which is a very complicated question. We have 10 minutes of video aimed for teachers and for educators in order to gain enough confidence and to get to their students and enter the class with enough knowledge, and you actually use these tools, these video toolboxes with their students. We use animated infographic in order to explain key concepts in Holocaust history, video for frontal and online teaching. We have survivor testimony films, by the way, in 17 different languages and all available on YouTube. So these are testimonies, not 5 or 6 hours testimonies, but more educate for a better fit for the attention span of a class, formal, by the way, and informal education. We have new Holocaust podcasts exploring different topics. This is something that we're launching actually this year. And we have other stuff like MOOCs, these massive open online courses. Yad Vashem has been pioneering learning in this format since 2015. And I can tell you, up until now, more than 200,000 people from 160 countries were participants of these courses. Now, these are not social media or sound bites courses. These are long, deep courses, academic level, and we have participants from all around the world, including some maybe surprising countries like Syria or Sri Lanka or South Sudan or Qatar.
Doesn't have connection to the Holocaust in their history.
Don't have direct connections, of course, to the story. Of course, MOOCs in English, we have translations to Hebrew, of course, then also to French and Spanish. So we're very much spread around with the MOOCs. We have online accredited courses, and of course, we're very active in the social networks, as I'm sure Dana will explore later on. I want to actually read to you that aside from providing a comprehensive educational experience, MOOCs also have untold influence in other directions. And I want to read you a statement from a Scottish MP, Neil Hanvey, and I quote because he published it. He took it upon himself to educate himself about anti-Semitism following some anti-Semitic posts. And he writes, "These past few months of study and reflection have been a journey of great personal value." And he states, "We all share the responsibility to speak up, speak out, and most importantly, support and educate. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to do so." This he wrote this statement after taking Yad Vashem's MOOC about anti-Semitism. So last but not least, and I said that we have a lot of face-to-face tools. We even in the COVID-19 era, we haven't stopped with these tools completely. We have musical memory evenings where students of music set poems that chosen by or written by Holocaust survivors and victims, and they set the poems to modern music, and then they perform it to other students their age. We have art and design Holocaust theme projects, including video, sculpture, interactive media, and print. Through the Lens Project, students of photography meet survivors, study about their stories, etc., etc. Some of these things we started to do online because of the pandemic, and some of them were still face-to-face, but these are all ideas, creative ideas in how to engage students using their own interests in order and opening a window in order to enter this subject matter.
So actually, I can say that we had a question from our viewers. We've been asked by Tobias Ebert Hartman from Israel. He said, how can we motivate younger generations to engage with Holocaust memory? I think that in your talk right now, you actually answer this question, and with all the examples that you gave, and the multidisciplinary approach, as far as I can understand the way that you present, the way we reach to the students through their teachers and directly to them, is one of the ways we can engage, and also using all these various tools, and each new tool that exists is something that we try and see how it can be modified and used in order to engage with them, if it's video, tool books, animation, art, various kinds of art, and others. So thank you, Eyal. Dana, can you comment on how we can continue to think out of the box while we are or stuck in it? Or in other words, how do we appeal to the public in the area of social media? And if you can also try to charge where are the red lines between what constitute as technology in the service of memory versus the trivialization and sensationalization of the Holocaust, please.
Okay. So I would say that, first of all, in terms of curating content, as I mentioned, we try to curate content for social media that is relevant to an event, relevant, for example, during Women's History Month, we share stories on social media platforms on women during the Holocaust all through the month. We've had Facebook Live, a female historian from the school, Dr. Schick, who spoke about the experience of women in Auschwitz. So in other words, we try to utilize and leverage what's happening in the world, what's happening, events, etc., and try to share what we have that's relevant. But I think if you want to talk about technology in the service of memory, I would relate to two projects that we did this year. Amongst the many, but these I think stand out because of the global response and interaction and engagement. And one of them was to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day, where we launched the I Remember wall, which is a wall on our website in which, by joining the wall, when a person comes to this virtual wall, he or she are automatically matched with a victim from our Shoah Victims Names database, a victim of the Holocaust, and their names appear together on the wall with a photo. And people are encouraged also in the share button to share it in their social media. We partnered with this project with Facebook International, who was actually extraordinarily helpful to us to reach a really large global audience in 6 languages. And tens of thousands of people joined this wall. Tens of thousands of people joined the wall, shared their stories, created stories, which is actually an effort because you have to download the photo and download the document and create this story that they wanted to. What was clear to us is that people wanted to not just observe and not just listen, but to do something participatory, in which they were part of some kind of, was said last night, culture of memory, some type of community, some type of online commemoration where they felt part of something. Now,
so what you're saying, we're using the platform, the Facebook platform, with all the other problems that we are in this summit and others hear about, the problem of anti-Semitism, hate speech, Holocaust distortion, Holocaust denial, that these platforms allowed. You're saying we're using these platforms also to reach the public through these platforms, through what they offer, to engage with the people, and you're saying that people are participating more and more in that.
Listen, social media is all about opportunity and responsibility. That's the bottom line. So we took what we learned from the I Remember wall to Holocaust Remembrance Day, which, although it was 4 months later, it was like an eternity later because it took place about 6 weeks into the pandemic. And we realized that people who were basically in lockdown all over the world wouldn't be able to go to ceremonies. So we said, okay, we're going to create online ceremonies by asking the public to record themselves, video themselves, saying the name of Holocaust victims that we gave them access to on the website, or perhaps from their family or whatever, to video themselves, to put the video on, to post that video on any social media platform with the hashtag Remembering From Home. Because of that hashtag, we were able to collate, we were able to aggregate all these videos into online ceremonies. And people participated from 50 countries, so you can imagine the...
One of the people, the first people that participated, I can tell the crowd here, our viewers, one of the first persons, or actually the person who's going to speak according to the program after this panel, is the Foreign Minister of Germany, Heiko Maas, who recorded himself reading names of Holocaust victims from Germany, and took and uploaded to the social media channels that he's active in. And of course, he was also part of the ceremony that was aggregation of all these reading people, from little kids, from people who just read names, even from the Stolperstein, if you know what that, the viewers know what that means. And also, of course, also from the Yad Vashem's website when we offered the names.
So that was fascinating, and it was actually more than that. It was very moving for us. It was an incredible experience looking at all of these videos from all walks of life, all ages, families. We had a family who did a compilation video, 30 members of a family from all over the States, each of which remembered a name, ending with the oldest member of the family, who was a Holocaust survivor, almost 100 years old, who remembered his parents who were killed. So this experience of having people from all over the world, and I have to say, no two videos were the same. They had different backgrounds, and different people use all kinds of different ways to do it. So really, no two are the same. But what they did have in common is that, at least from the hundreds and hundreds that we were able to collate and aggregate, there were no theatrics and there were no gimmicks. Sometimes people had music, and sometimes, but they were, at the end of the day, and I'm going to use this word again because I think it's imperative, they were respectful to the topic. So I would say, if anything, that would be technology that was really in the ultimate service of memory from our point of view.
Thank you, Dana. Professor Kassow, the last question is for you. As we have heard from other panelists, there is a challenge and urgency to share authentic and accurate information about the Holocaust and the events surrounding it. How could researchers leverage this kind of technology to ensure that their research and work reaches the widest audiences of scholars, students, and pretty much anyone who is interested in the history of the Holocaust?
Well, I think of my own research on the Ringelblum archive in the Warsaw Ghetto, which has now been digitized by the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw, published in 36 volumes in Polish, and now 10 volumes in English will appear. And resources like this are important because they make available real-time testimonies of Jews who were in the middle of these events, who did not survive, who did not know what happened tomorrow, what would happen to them tomorrow. This is quite different from survivor testimony, but the interplay of real-time testimony and survivor memoirs is a very important teaching tool in understanding of the Holocaust. Another project that I'm involved in is the digitization of testimony from the Fortunoff Video Archive at Yale, where selected testimonies are being made available to the public. And then there's a podcast, and I'm writing background to each example of testimony. And in the process, I kind of provide a certain degree of historical commentary. I knew personally some of these survivors who were testifying. I point out the differences between the story that they would like to tell years after the event and the real story that happened to them. A reminder that while there's pressure on survivors to put together a nice narrative and fashion a happy ending, in fact, the happy ending is usually or very often not as happy as they would like to have people think. In all of this, I personally am always aware of a challenge that I'm facing as a teacher and as a scholar. That on the one hand, I understand that we have a responsibility to relate what happened in the Holocaust to wider questions of genocide, persecution, othering, prejudice. But on the other hand, I never want to forget, and I never want other people to forget, that the Holocaust, in a basic sense, was that Jews were murdered because they were Jews. And it reminds us of the demonic and potential of anti-Semitism, the protean nature of anti-Semitism, the way anti-Semitism can be mobilized to persecute Jews for all kinds of different and contradictory reasons. And it reminds us of the way anti-Semitism can constantly morph. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs once said, they used to hate Jews because of their religion, then they hated Jews because of their race. Now Jews are often hated because of their state. And the lessons of the Holocaust can really not be divorced from the lessons of anti-Semitism, and they could not be divorced from the need to remind people that anti-Semitism has not disappeared. It's an ongoing problem. So I always find myself kind of torn between these two different issues, the universal and the Jewish.
And actually, there is universal meaning and lessons that you can learn from the Holocaust. But you were saying that it needs to come out from understanding the particular component and character of the event that is the Holocaust.
Yes.
If I can sum up what your main thought is here, and that's making things more accessible and engagement can have the danger of stepping into the just universal aspect without remembering the context and what it was exactly. And you, as a scholar, specifically, and I guess also as educators, and all of us needs to keep this balance and not because it's easily you can drawn into the easy part, let's say, of just talking about the universal aspect, which are important but cannot be disconnect from the particular. Thank you, Professor Kassow. It's really thought-provoking and interesting. So actually, in the few moments that we have, do you have some parting thoughts? Eyal, is there something you would like to add?
So, thank you. I want to echo Tobias's question about engagement, and just add engagement. There are many ways of engaging people. My main point here was that engagement is not enough. The social media, the digital media usually raises awareness, but you must have the you must take the other step and engage in a deeper understanding. And this deeper understanding, this deeper learning, you can draw people through pedagogical means, through authenticity, through personal stories. Like Professor Kassow said, don't forget when you use personal stories, don't forget the victims, and don't forget that they weren't born in Auschwitz. Get deeper into their backgrounds, where they were born, what was their Jewish community like, how did it look like? They were normal people like us. And when you show this to students, from my experience, they are engaged, and you create, and don't forget that there's time and place to studying the Holocaust, to the Holocaust itself. This way you create meaning. So when we talk about relevance, we're talking about creating meaning and meaningful learning to students.
That it will make it stay and not just be the touch and go, and will not have the deeper effect. And awareness is important, but you cannot end with that and stop with that. Dana, do you have any parting thoughts before we?
No, I think I would continue from what Eyal said, that sharing the faces, the voices of those who perished and those who survived and finding a way to do it in a way that's relevant and meaningful for the public is an ongoing challenge. It's something that we really deal with, and every single day, not just how people engage with us, how we are engaging and what we're doing and what we're sharing. And I think I would sum up by actually a tweet, ironically, that somebody tweeted who had given some photos and personal family memories from the Holocaust, letters, etc., to Yad Vashem. And he tweeted that he was so happy to do that. And he said, their place in history is now in the future. That was his tweet. And I think for us, that is probably
that's our main challenge.
Yes, that is our challenge, ongoing.
All of us who deals with the Holocaust in our daily life, that's our challenge, to make their history in the future, and of course to use everything and to keep the whole idea respectful to the topic and relevant to the public. And this is a huge challenge as this summit was conducting. So, parting thoughts from Professor Kassow before we are separating from this panel? Are you mute? Professor Kassow, you just muted yourself, please.
Yeah, I often think of what it means to be in a world where all the survivors are gone. As a child of survivors who was actually born in Europe, I grew up in a survivor community, and now all these people are gone. And their stories, their memories, their experiences, that's the challenge is, how do we convey that? And this has been a major subject of our discussion today. I would like to think going forward that people will read history books, that people will listen to the historians. I know that's not going to happen. And therefore, I really understand that Holocaust awareness in the future, to some degree, is going to depend on film, and it's going to depend on other media. The film that was made of my book on Emanuel Ringelblum reached many, many more people than the actual book. And I think that going forward, one concern that should animate us is to make sure that these representations of the Holocaust in film and in fiction are responsible and have integrity.
Great. Thank you very much. A very important point. So thank you, everyone, for your participation and your enlightened contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.